How do we effectively make disciples in the 21st century? Do we still have the liberty not to be creative? Join us for lunch.
Oh my Lord, sing hallelujah people. Oh my Lord, sing to the world. Follow the light, fight the good fight. God knows you're right to get on the righteous road.
Cris Rogers is an author, speaker, and part of the Jesus movement. He's currently director of All Hallows, London. Welcome to lunch, Cris Rogers. Hello.
Thank you for having me. Welcome.
Thank you so much for stopping for lunch.
Welcome to my study.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you very much. I'm really good.
I can see you've been busy planting churches and making disciples.
Yeah.
How are you getting on with this?
Yeah, we're really good. Me and my wife planted a church in East London in 2010. Previous to that, we'd planted a church in a skate park in Birmingham. We'd played around at planting churches, but we moved here in 2010 and we planted a church into an old Anglican building that was going to be sold to become a mosque.
Wow.
And then a couple of years ago, we trained up some leaders and we planted a church in Canning Town. We just trained up some more leaders and we're about to send these guys into Stratford to start a church. So, yeah, it's fun. People want to know about Jesus, don't they?
Absolutely.
They do want to know about Jesus.
Absolutely. And I see it's going well.
It's going really well. The vision for what we're trying to do here is grow a church for normal people. There's a lot of people out there that love being religious and they love being Christians and they love all the jargon and the Christian words. We're trying to do church for those that don't understand Christianity and people who are coming into Christianity and finding Jesus from the edges. So we have a lot of recovering addicts, people who are ex-offenders, people who have believed in the past that church couldn't be for them because they're not like that kind of people that go to church. And we're trying to say, no, the church is meant to be like a hospital for sick people, not a place for well people. So yeah, that's what we're trying to grow. It's just a really honest, normal group of people who are coming to realise that Jesus really is good news.
How easy is it to reach out to these people?
It's a good question. And I think it's partly down to your attitude and where you place yourself. So Becky and I, we relocated to this place for the purposes of loving the hell out of our neighbourhood. So we moved. Because we've moved, we shop in the same shops as them, our kids go to the same schools, and we've just become local. It's no longer are we trying to go to and reach. We're now one of. And I think our mission worldview is like we want to become a part of the neighbourhood to reach the neighbourhood. And when you become a part of the neighbourhood, people trust you. And because they trust you, they'll listen to you. But whenever you're trying to do mission to people, I think that's when it's hard. It's hard work because they don't trust you. So we've spent 10 years now building up relationships and building up trust so that when life falls apart, they turn to their friends who are called Chris and Becky, who are also members of the local church. So I think that's how it becomes easier. It becomes much easier when you do it via friendship rather than that cold contact.
Of course, it does take some time to build up that confidence and friendship.
Yeah, and I think, but that the model of the gospel, Jesus moves in and it says that he became one of the neighbourhood. The incarnation, religious word, for Jesus moving in. Jesus becomes the boy next door. And when he becomes the boy next door, he then is able to relate to everybody who lives around him. And that's, what we're trying to do is become the boys next door, the guys next door, so that people relate to us. It takes time, but I think it's where real mission starts to happen. You start to reach the unreachable because they're not unreachable, because they're now your friends. Yeah.
Okay, so after they've become your friends and they've grown in the faith, what happens next?
Well, discipleship's the thing, isn't it? I don't know how many churches, if you approach a church and said to the congregation, what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? How many members of the congregation would genuinely know what that actually means? And I think what we're finding is a lot of churches, we talk about discipleship, but when it comes down to it, we're not necessarily clear on what that really means. or our congregations aren't clear on what that really means. Because I think many of our churches think we're just trying to grow more people in the seats. Whereas actually what we're looking for is depth and life transformed. And Jesus never says, go and make me more believers. He says, go and make me more disciples. And I think there's a lot of us that are, rather than following Jesus, we're fans of Jesus. And a disciple is not a fan of Jesus, but a follower, somebody who's taking the cost of being a disciple. So for us, the thing after conversion, the thing after you come to faith, is discipleship. So if you said, Chris, what does it mean to be a disciple? I would say I'm super inspired by the Gospels when Jesus is approached. Jesus, how do I gain eternal life? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And what Jesus is saying there is love God with all areas of your life. So I would say discipleship is loving God with your head, your heart, and your hands. And then I'd say, what does it mean to love God with your head? Well, it isn't just about cramming our heads full of more knowledge of Jesus. Historians have heads full of knowledge of Jesus, but they're historians. It doesn't change anything. They know Jesus exists. They know he's teaching. They might teach in a lecture room. But you can have a lot of knowledge of Jesus. If that knowledge doesn't start to transform your heart and transform what you believe about yourself, what you believe about others, giving your heart of flesh, not a heart of stone, your heart becoming like the heart of Christ, passionate about the same things that Christ is passionate about. Until that actually happens, you're only really a fan of Jesus. A follower is somebody who takes the teaching of Jesus and it becomes a part of their heart, becomes a part of what they're living and breathing every day. And then once that's happening, then it becomes something we live out with our hands. Your credit card is not yours. Your credit card is Jesus's. He's just given it to you for the purpose and the work of his kingdom. I often do this thing where I say to my congregation, raise your hand if you own a mobile phone. And all these hands go up. And I say, no, you don't. God's lent you a mobile phone, but when you die, you can't take it with you. It's not yours. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So as a disciple, we are coming to the realization that everything we've got is being gifted to us for the purposes of living out the gospel. So a disciple is somebody who knows what Jesus teaches, is passionate about what Jesus is passionate about, and then starts doing what Jesus does with the resources that God has given us. So that becomes the next step. And I think that's the biggest and most difficult step of our lives. Coming to believe in Jesus, that's easy. That's the first step. Living Jesus, now that's the lifelong adventure. And it's exciting, but it's super difficult.
It is. I agree.
Super difficult.
I agree. So someone watching today might be wondering, how do I actually start this? Have you got tips?
Yeah, number one, if you're not in part of a local church community, get involved with one. You have to. I think there's too much of a self-centered culture in our culture that's influencing Christians at the moment, where I don't need to go to a church to be a follower of Jesus. Unfortunately, I think you do. Jesus died to bring you back into three relationships. The relationship with God, the relationship with each other, and the relationship with the planet. When we sinned, we break those three relationships. Jesus died to bring us back into a relationship with our Father, with each other, and with the planet. Unfortunately, what we've done is we've taken the other two out. We've made it all about a relationship with God. And if you think being a Christian is about having a relationship with God, you've missed the bigness of the gospel. We are meant to be in relationship with each other. So you can't be a disciple of Jesus and not be in relationship. So if you're not in relationship with the Christians, do it. Get involved with the local church. And don't start shopping around for the perfect church, because I can guarantee you will break the perfect church the moment you arrive, because no one of us is perfect. And then the other thing is, I would say, start thinking about how you disciple your mind and how you allow your heart to be transformed, and how are you activating the teaching of Jesus. So for me, whenever I read a Bible passage, I always ask the question, what changes today because I've read this passage? What do I now do differently because this passage has told me something about God's influence in the world, or my position in the world, or what God thinks about humanity or people? So what now looks different? And I think it's that activating what we've read that is really important. So it's not just learning what Jesus says, it's doing what Jesus does. So if somebody's really interested in growing in the depth of discipleship, get involved with the local church and start asking the question, what changes for me now because I'm reading a passage in the Bible?
So if I ask the question, what changes now? How do I actually activate it? I know you said something about doing. So before it gets to acting it out, is there anything that we're missing?
Yeah, well, if we're starting right from scratch, from basic, and somebody does not know where to start, I would say, get yourself a Bible.
Yeah.
I promote something called the 3-2-1, the daily retreat.
Okay.
And in the daily retreat, for 3 minutes, you read the Bible.
Okay.
You take a small passage of the Bible, read it for 3 minutes, and read it over and over. Allow it to, cheap meat can taste really good if it's marinaded in a good marinade. Many of us, we're pretty cheap meat. And if we allow Scripture and the Spirit of God to marinade in us, we become tasty. Well, for the kingdom anyway. So for 3 minutes, allow the passage to marinade you. Just read it over and over.
Yeah.
2 minutes, then just tell God what's going on in your day. What's happening today, Lord? Then 1 minute, sit in silence and say, God, what do you want to say to me through this passage? Or what do you want to say directly into my life today? So that for me would be a key step. Start your day with a 6-minute retreat. Why 6 minutes? It's the first step. It's 3 minutes of reading the Bible should become 5, should become 10, should become 20. But the problem is we scare people off by saying you've got to do an hour's Bible reading every day. And then we put them off and they never do it. Look, start 3 minutes. Simple little step. And let it grow from there. And then for me, once you've done that, as I walk away from my 6-minute retreat, I start asking myself, right, that passage, God, that I've just read, what has that got to do with me today? Is there something in this passage? So I was recently reading the scriptures where it says that Jesus travels across Lake Galilee and he goes to the Decapolis, to the other side of Lake Galilee. Yeah. And when he arrives there, there's a man who's living in the tombs. And the man from the tombs comes to Jesus and Jesus casts out the demons. And I was reading that passage and saying, God, what does that tell me about my day? What do you want me to do differently? And I really sense God just say to me, there's a lot of people in your day, Chris, who are living in tombs of death. And all I'm inviting you to do is call them out of those tombs and to speak a fresh word over their life that they may become free from the death that's wrapping up their life. I was like, God, but what does that mean? And he reminded me of somebody that I work with and know. And I said, right, God, this person's on my mind. How does this passage relate to how I relate to this person? I just really felt like the Lord said, well, firstly, he's living in a tomb. He's dead at the moment. He's living in this tomb. And I want you to call him out for lunch. Go for lunch with him. And while calling him out from the tomb to join you for lunch, I want to give you prompts in what to speak into his life. So I did, and we had lunch together. And he's actually a Muslim guy. Wow. And I've given him in the past just a copy of the New Testament. And we read Psalm 23 together, which is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. And he's going through some really difficult stuff at the moment. So I said, look, let's read this passage together. And it was great. We had a little bit of a prayer time. And, God can take us on a journey. If we start with our 3-2-1, a daily retreat, and then we say to ourselves, what does this look like? And then we push that and say, God, in my mind, bring somebody to my attention that I can live this passage out with. And here is a guy that I'm seeing on a process of God revealing himself to him. He's not demon possessed, so I don't need to cast out any demons, which is good. But he is confused and he is lost. So I'm able to speak a fresh word over his life, a word of encouragement, a word of life over him. So I call it practicing resurrection. When I sit with him, I get to practice the resurrection by speaking something fresh over him that is life-giving. If people are really interested in discipleship and want to grow in their discipleship, I run a website called wearemakingdisciples.com. And on that, we have this beautiful little assessment tool. Because when we become followers of Jesus, Jesus wants us to be influenced in all areas of our lives. But most of us don't realise what those areas are until we have a bit of a prod. So what we've got on there is an assessment tool that asks you 20 questions, and it lets you look at how are you doing with your discipleship in these areas, and it gives you what we call a discipleship shape, and it's all about understanding how much of a head Christian we are, how much of a heart Christian, and how much of a hands Christian, because we're all a little bit wonky. Some of us love the Bible, but then don't activate it. Some of us love prayer, but then don't know why we do what we do, or we don't activate it into action. Some of us love serving the poor, but don't know why we do it. So it's a simple tool to help us look at how are we doing in all areas of our lives. So I'd say go there, check out wearemakingdisciples.com and do the little assessment tool. And there's loads of other things on the website. There's blogs and videos and all sorts, and that kind of stuff on there. But head there, and that'll really help you on that next step journey of asking, how do I allow Jesus to influence all areas of my life?
Well, Cris, thank you so much for chatting with us
No,
today.
it's a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for your fellowship today. If this has blessed you, you know the usual. Like, comment and follow. And don't forget to tag someone who needs to see this video. Stay blessed and keep fighting the good fight of faith.
Oh, my Lord, sing hallelujah, people. Oh, my Lord, sing to the world.